The growl was not just a sound. It was a vibration that ran down Alara's spine, a primal tremor that bypassed her ears and penetrated straight to her bones. It was the sound of hunger, of bared teeth, not in fleeting threat, but with a chilling promise to tear flesh apart. For a moment, the world narrowed to that sound, and the bitter Montana winter, the gnawing emptiness in her stomach, even the frozen tears on her cheeks ceased to exist. The moonlight, sharp and merciless as shards of ice, pierced the thick, snow-covered pine trees of the wild 1890s, illuminating a small clearing with a ghostly light. Alara, who was no more than 10 years old, knelt in the snowdrifts that greedily engulfed her thin legs up to her knees. Her tattered woolen scarf, knitted by her mother, now faded to blue, provided almost no warmth in the bitter cold, and at the sight of the scene unfolding before her. Next to her, leaning against a snow-covered fallen log, lay Keme, a warrior of the Nakota tribe, whose face, usually marked by the wisdom of the prairies, was now pale and tense with pain. A dark, ugly stain had blossomed on the deerskin tunic covering his chest, standing out sharply against the pure whiteness and spreading like a malevolent shadow. He breathed shallowly and intermittently, each breath turning into a wisp of steam that was instantly absorbed by the icy air. Between them and the source of the terrifying growl stood Nawel, Kame's younger brother. He was a silhouette against the moonlit snow, his body tense as a bowstring. In his hand he held a hunting knife, its blade reflecting the faint light, his only fragile shield against the huge forest wolf that had materialized from the inky darkness of the surrounding woods. The wolf was a creature born of the cruel heart of winter. Its gray and black fur stood on end over its powerful shoulders. Its yellow eyes, like malicious pieces of amber, were fixed on Kem, the weaker prey. A low, continuous growl vibrated in its deep chest, and its lips were curled back, exposing an arsenal of terrifying teeth, saliva freezing on its muzzle to form tiny icicles. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, his paws sinking almost silently into the deep snow, a predator confident of his imminent victory. Alara wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but remain frozen in a statue of terror. But fear, cold and absolute, robbed her of her voice and turned her limbs to lead. Her gaze darted from Kem's heavy breathing to Nahuel's motionless figure, then to the approaching wolf. The scene seemed like a nightmare, one of those terrible dreams where your feet are rooted to the ground, and danger is closing in. Just a few days ago, her world had been different. Her small family, her father, mother, and she, had been traveling west, pursuing the dream of a small plot of land in Oregon. Then a blizzard had struck, a white fury that had separated them from their meager belongings. Her father had gone for help, wrapped up against the storm, and promised to return. He never returned. Her mother, her strength drained by cold and grief, slowly faded away, and with her last words, she whispered to Alara to be strong, to survive. Lost and alone, Alara wandered through the frozen desert, a tiny, desperate figure against the indifferent landscape. She was found by Keme and Nawel when she was delirious and on the verge of death from exposure. They were on a winter hunt, far from their tribe, and took her in without question. Keme, with his kind eyes, shared his meager provisions with her and wrapped her in a spare buffalo hide. Nahuel, quieter and more serious, silently made sure the fire did not go out, and his presence was constant and reassuring. Their journey in search of shelter, perhaps a remote hunter's hut that Nahuel knew of, was difficult. But then disaster struck again. Crossing a snow-covered ravine, Kem slipped. The fall was not serious, but he hit a sharp rock hidden under the snow. The wound on his chest was severe and deep. They set up camp in the clearing. Nahuel tried to stop the bleeding, and Alara huddled close to him, throwing branches onto the fire. Alara realized with horror that the smell of blood had probably been carried by the wind, attracting a predator at the top of the forest food chain. The wolf lunged at them. It was a blur of gray fur and snapping teeth. Nahuel met the attack with a guttural cry, a warrior's scream that momentarily stunned the beast. He dodged with agility that seemed impossible in the deep snow and swung his knife upward. The wolf howled in pain as the blade grazed its side and dark blood spurted from the wound. But the beast was huge and blinded by hunger. It writhed, ignoring the wound, and lunged at Nahuel's outstretched arm. Nahuel jumped back, his arm slightly grazed, but he did not flinch. He moved with grim grace, performing a deadly dance in the moonlight. The wolf, enraged, circled around, looking for an opportunity to attack. Its yellow eyes flashed toward Kem, who was still an easier target. Kem, despite his weakness, tried to get up, clutching the hunting axe that lay next to him in his trembling hand. "Nahuel, the girl," he croaked, his voice barely audible above the wolf's growls. Alara saw her chance, a desperate, foolish idea born of fear and a sudden fierce need to protect the people who had saved her. Her gloved hands dug into the snow and clenched a piece of ice-covered wood, perhaps a branch, heavy and sturdy. It wasn't much, but it was something. When the wolf lunged at Keme again, slightly knocking Nahuel off balance, Alara jumped to her feet. Her legs, numb with cold and fear, protested, but she forced them to move. "Leave him!" she shouted, her voice trembling, but sounding surprisingly loud in the silence. She threw the piece of wood with all her strength. The throw was clumsy and inaccurate, but it hit the wolf in the back. The blow was insignificant, but the surprise of the attack from a new direction made the beast flinch and turn its head, and its growl died down for a moment. That split second was enough for Nahuel. He lunged forward, not with the wild fury of a wolf, but with focused, deadly intent. His knife sank deep into the wolf's exposed neck, just below the jaw. The animal let out a choking, gurgling cry, its powerful body shaking. It began to convulse, spraying snow and blood, then collapsed, its huge body shaking one last time before going still. A deep silence fell, broken only by Nahuel's heavy, ragged breathing and Kem's faint sighs. Alara stood trembling, the adrenaline draining from her, leaving her weak and nauseous. The air was thick with the heavy smell of blood, both wolf and human. Nahuel did not look at the wolf. He rushed to Kem and fell to his knees. "Brother, Kem!" He gently touched Kem's face, which was contorted with pain. Kem opened his eyes. A faint smile appeared on his lips. "The girl! She has spirit," he whispered, looking at Alara. "Like a little badger. Fierce." Alara slowly approached, her heart pounding. The dead wolf, its blood staining the snow a gruesome crimson, was a terrible testament to the cruelty of this land. But even more painful was the look on Nahuel's face as he stared at his brother. "We have to stop the bleeding," Alara said in a quiet but firm voice. She remembered how her mother had once bandaged her father's cut hand with clean strips of cloth. She looked at her torn scarf, then at the relatively clean lining of her coat. Nahuel looked up and met her gaze. For the first time she saw not stoic determination in his eyes, but a glimmer of despair and, perhaps, reluctant respect. He nodded briefly, then began to feel Kem's wound cautiously, his touch surprisingly gentle for a man who had just killed a wild wolf. The moon rose higher, casting long, dancing shadows from the pine trees. The clearing was a picture of survival and despair, a dying warrior, a stoic protector, and a young girl hardened by loss, finding unexpected strength in the heart of the frozen wilderness. The immediate threat was gone, but the vast, unforgiving wilderness remained, and the struggle for survival was far from over. Kami's life hung in the balance, and the road ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, cold and frightening as the endless snow in the moonlight. Elar, kneeling beside Nahuel, knew that whatever happened next, she would not be a mere bystander. Now she too was part of this struggle, bound to these two men of the Nakota tribe by a common danger and a faint flickering glimmer of hope in a world determined to extinguish it.